Hey, space friends, I'm here in Antarctica. As you can tell, it's pretty cold. With any luck, if this is all coming across to you, this might actually be the very first YouTube live stream from McMurdo Station. So that's pretty exciting. So I am actually here in McMurdo Station. It's a United States station. It's the largest station here in Antarctica, and actually you can see a lot of the station here behind me. And this station is run by the National Science Foundation. And in summertime, which it's summertime here, it's hard to tell because it's snowing, but it's summertime here, and there are 900 people approximately here on station. So they are all housed right behind me. And so McMurdo Station is on Ross Island, and Ross Island is a little island right next to the main continent of Antarctica. And it's just a helicopter ride away from the Dry Valleys. And I spent 10 days in the Dry Valleys, and the Dry Valleys are an incredibly unique place here in Antarctica. It's the largest place in Antarctica where there's no snow or ice. Why that's really exciting is because Antarctica is full of, as you can tell, snow and ice. And when you're here, you get really curious about what it's like underneath all that snow and ice, what the continent itself is like, and what it would be like to actually walk on the continent and not just on the ice covering it. And so that's what the Dry Valleys provides. And it's an incredibly exciting place to go to, both for science and for the scenes. And so we're right next to the Dry Valleys here in McMurdo Station, and it's, I guess, the end of November here in McMurdo, and the degree temperature here in November varies between 5 degrees Fahrenheit to 25 degrees Fahrenheit typically in November, but with wind, it can get even colder. So today's one of those days where it's a bit of a colder day for November, but I'm out here braving it so I can broadcast to all of you. So I hope this is fun. Just going over some different things here. Oh yeah, so I've actually spent 5 weeks total in Antarctica. I'm going back home soon, but I wanted to broadcast live to all of you first. And so the last few days, I took in some questions from both Twitter and Patreon to answer for you here on this live stream. So I'll be going through those in sort of random order. So beginning with some of these questions here that I'm looking at. So we had Laughing Man on Patreon ask, what was the most interesting thing you found or did during your time in Antarctica? Certainly going to the Dry Valleys for 10 days was really, really interesting. And actually getting to hike up on top of a glacier that exists at Lake Hoare, one of the campsites in the Dry Valleys, was fantastic. But here on station, there's a lot going on. And one of the coolest things here in McMurdo Station that anyone can go to is the ob tube, also known as the observation tube. And it's essentially a metal pipe, so to speak, that they put into the ice, and you can actually crawl into this metal tube beneath the ice and actually look underneath the sea ice and look at all the fish and the seals and everything that are going around you. It's a metal pipe that has windows around all sides at the bottom of it. So you crawl into this very tiny, skinny tube, you get down there, and then everything is quiet and dark, and you can actually see all of life that exists, and it is definitely a treat. So if you ever know anyone who's going to McMurdo during the summertime, that is like the go-to destination here that I think has been absolutely fantastic. With any luck, I'm going to try and actually go a second time because I enjoyed it just so much. So going to some of the other questions. We had someone else write in asking what kind of music fits best with Antarctica. So music that fits best with Antarctica, I would kind of just go with anything. Being here is such an epic experience that suddenly cheesy music becomes really good. So in a lot of the Dry Valley camps, like we were listening to like some really like cheesy like U2 music and like other music that like I wouldn't normally listen to, but everything just felt that much more epic when you listen to it down here. So all sorts of music suddenly becomes good when you're down here. Another question here we have from Twitter. Ian O'Neill asked, were you able to watch the NASA InSight Mars landing from down there? So we did actually have a Mars landing viewing here at McMurdo that was hosted by Brittany Schmidt. And Brittany works on a bunch of space science and robots for space. She's actually testing a robot down here underneath the sea ice that could be really applicable towards space exploration. So she hosted a Mars landing party, and it was really, really well attended for McMurdo. Like, it was standing room only. If you want to go to my Twitter account, twitter.com/Ariel Waldman, I think I tweeted a couple of photos actually from that viewing party a couple of days ago. Okay, other questions. Let's see. So Danielle Gunn on Twitter asks, what does it feel like mentally to be someplace so desolate, frigid, far away for so long? It actually doesn't feel that bad. With 900 people here on station, it's pretty friendly and there's a really great community and there's a lot to do. But even in the dry valleys where you've only got, perhaps, 8 other people that you're at a campsite with, community becomes a really big thing and you quickly don't feel so alone. Everyone has different experiences and everyone experiences things differently. So some people can be down here for longer than others. For me personally, I actually haven't had much trouble. Being here for 5 weeks is definitely a long time for a lot of people, but there's so much to do that it actually does go by rather quickly. Other questions here. Let's see. Kyle, I think on Twitter asks, what tools or utilities do you find yourself using the most down there? That's a good question. A lot of the things that I am using are things like, one of the most useful things I've had is an iFixit kit, which is just a whole ton of different sizes of screwdrivers and Allen wrenches and things of that nature. It's really silly, but I'm doing a lot of work with microscopes down here, looking at all of the microbes that are beneath the ice in different locations. And microscopes are not standardized tools. So actually having a tool set so that you can take apart any sort of device that you need to while you're down here has been really massively useful. Beyond that, I would say having gaff tape is like something that now I'm going to always travel with wherever I go, because that's just massively useful. Other questions here. Puzzlehead on Twitter asks, is terrestrial or extraterrestrial science more fulfilling? I would say, something about being a space geek. I think the longer that you are a space geek, you end up becoming an Earth geek, because you realize how unique Earth is, at least for what we know now in our own galaxy and in our solar system. And the more you get obsessed with space, the more you start getting obsessed with Earth. And that's one of the reasons that I'm down here in Antarctica, is because Earth is a pretty freaking cool planet when it comes down to it. And, we all technically already live in space. So I think it's all related, and I don't think it's an either or. Other questions? Well, my hands get a little cold up here. Oh, another massively useful tool is hand warmers, which I am definitely using right now, because it gets cold. So looking at some of these other questions. Puzzlehead also asked on Twitter, would I consider coming in the winter months? I think that's a maybe. It really depends. It's definitely a different vibe here in the winter. There's far less people here in McMurdo Station. There's not 900 people. There's only like maybe a couple hundred or 100 something. So it's a much smaller crew, and you are kind of here for several months at a time. I'm not saying no, but it would take a lot of consideration on my part to consider coming down here for the winter. And, it's fairly cold here in the summer too. So I'm getting a taste of just how bad it might be. So Kyle from Twitter also asked, how has Antarctica changed your perspective on the rest of the world? So being down here, I think, is interesting in that you really have a dichotomy. You're in this place that is considered so extreme, and very few people are able to visit it. And so in that way, it feels very, special and different and foreign. But at the same time, being down here, you realize, that it is just part of Earth, and that, there are many features here that are like many features here on Earth. So arriving in McMurdo, the first thing you kind of notice is that what looks like mud behind me is actually lava rocks. So you're walking around on dirt that looks like much of Hawaii does, or much of any other volcanic area does. It's not dirt, it's actually volcanic rock. And so things like that are really interesting, because you start making these tiny connections the longer you're here of how much this actually does relate to the rest of the Earth, and that it is actually part of the Earth, and that it's not so different. And so I think coming down here to Antarctica, it's a special place, but also making it more normal, I think, is a thing that probably we would all benefit from, and understanding how it is actually part of our ecosystem as a whole rather than entirely separate from it, and how it's connected to it. And of course, that plays into climate change and global issues, and also how we think about searching for life elsewhere in space. If this is a very normal part of Earth, perhaps it's a very normal part of other planets as well. Looking at other things. Polonium Man on Twitter asked, what scientific instruments have you learned to operate while there? So while I've been down here, I've been using a lot of microscopes. I'm actually now a certified optical microscopist, so I know how to use these tools. I was thinking about this question, and I don't know that I'm actually operating any science tools that I don't already know how to work with, but there are some really cool things here in the lab in McMurdo Station that aren't common elsewhere. I think the coolest thing in the lab that I have access to is that they have seawater on tap. There's literally a tap of seawater constantly being pumped in to the Query Lab that you can use on demand for any reason. It's perhaps not as exciting as like beer on tap to other people, but for me it's pretty awesome because I'm working with a lot of critters that live beneath the sea ice, and so whenever I need to wash them out or sort of run them through a strain or anything, I can go up to this tube, get sea water whenever I want, and just sort of clean them off, so to speak, but keep them still in the same water that they like living in. So that's been a really fun thing about the lab that I've enjoyed. Kirsten Carlson on Patreon, who I believe is a person who actually was down here a couple of years ago on the same grant that I'm on. I'm actually on the NSF Antarctic Artists and Writers Grant, which funds artists to come down here, pays for your flight, pays for you to be here, doesn't pay for anything else, which is why I'm on Patreon, but they send artists down here. It's an open application process you can apply to once a year. I think the deadline is in May or June. So Kirsten is actually one of the artists who came down here, and she was a diver who actually was illustrating things as she was diving beneath the ice. And she is asking me, how is Science Hack Day shaping up? So Science Hack Day, as many of you who follow me know, Science Hack Day is an event where scientists, designers, developers, and all sorts of people get together in the same physical space to see what they can rapidly prototype in 24 consecutive hours. There are now Science Hack Days in 29 countries, and I'm really excited because in a couple of days' time, I'm going to be bringing the very first Science Hack Day to Antarctica. We don't necessarily have a full 24 hours to do prototyping because there are so many awesome things to do here, and I don't want to keep people from their jobs and from going and doing cool things like checking out the OBTube, like I mentioned, and other things here. So we're going to see what we can prototype in 5 hours, but I think McMurdo Station has got it in the bag because so much of coming down here, you realize people are pretty much treating every day like a hack day. You have to figure out how to make things work with limited resources. You have to be really creative. And so people are constantly making DIY devices and DIY things all over the station in order just to make things work. And that's kind of just the nature of things here in McMurdo. So I think they've got it in the bag to see what they can prototype in 5 consecutive hours on this coming Sunday. So I'm really excited for that. And we've gotten really great feedback. I think we've got some people coming with a 3D printer, and we've got other people bringing interesting data from the dry valleys and from under the sea ice and about the weather and things of that nature. Let's see, going through some of the other questions. What preconceived notions held up or changed after you arrived? I think the biggest one was just how friendly people are down here. Not that I was expecting it to be unfriendly, but people down here are extremely friendly and interested in hearing more about you and more about how, everything that you do, whether it's being a janitor or being an artist or being a scientist, everyone has just been incredibly friendly and welcoming. And that's been something that's been just really sweet and awesome to see. So that certainly changed my notion of what it might be like down here, because, it's easy to think that people might want to just stick to their own cliques and not be that open and welcome, but they are totally open and welcome. amazing. In terms of the actual continent itself, I think I don't know. Some of my preconceived notions have held up and some haven't. It's certainly cold here, but on a nice day when it is sunny and there's no wind, it's actually quite nice. So uh, that's been sort of nice to realize that not every day is an incredibly cold day, and that it is actually possible to camp outside in 5 degrees weather in a normal tent, and just make it work. And that's what I did for 10 days in the dry valleys. So I think there's a lot of notions about Antarctica that I'm still processing, and certainly in the coming weeks and months, I'm going to be processing for a long time, just about how I feel about it and what I think about it. But in general, I'm really excited to get going on the project that I came down here for, which, as I mentioned, is looking at microbes beneath the ice in different locations. So I've been filming microbes in many different locations in the dry valleys, the sea ice, getting samples from divers who actually dive here in Antarctica, which is very hardcore. And it's been really amazing to actually see all of these critters on film. And I'm really excited to share all of these videos with you in a website that will be my final project and sort of presentation of all of this work that I've been doing down here for the last 5 weeks. So that's coming in the coming months. I'm really excited to share it. And in the meantime, I'm getting a bit cold up here. It's it's definitely a colder day. There's snowflakes going across the screen as I talk to you now. And so I think I'm going to end the live stream here and now. But thank you all so much for tuning in. As always, remember to subscribe on YouTube, join my Patreon, follow me on Twitter, and I'm also posting updates on my Instagram. All of those are under the name Ariel Waldman. And perhaps next time you hear from me, at least on YouTube, I'm probably going to be back in the United States. So looking forward to seeing you all in a much warmer climate. And until then, have a great time.